The fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song above the polished linoleum floors of Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters. At 3:47 hours, when most of the building slept in administrative silence, Petty Officer First Class Marisol Wrench Vasquez pushed her industrial cart through corridors that had witnessed more classified conversations than a congressional hearing room. The wheels squeaked with mechanical precision, announcing her presence to empty offices where tomorrow's covert operations were planned behind reinforced steel doors. To everyone who bothered to look, she was just another face in the vast machinery of military logistics. The janitor, the invisible woman who emptied trash bins and mopped floors while warriors slept. Her coveralls bore no ribbons, no wings, no trident, just a name tape in the faded outline where Patches once lived. The higher-ups walked past her as if she were furniture, their conversations continuing unfiltered about insertion points and extraction protocols, never suspecting that the woman scrubbing their coffee stains had once piloted a Night Stalker helicopter through the mountains of Afghanistan. But tonight was different. Tonight, Marisol's cart carried more than industrial-grade cleaning supplies and discarded intelligence reports. Buried beneath layers of trash bags and cleaning chemicals sat a titanium briefcase, its contents worth more than the combined annual salary of every admiral in the building. The weight of it pressed against her conscience with every step, yet her expression remained blank, professional, invisible. The mystery began 3 weeks ago when Commander Patricia Ice Kellerman approached her during a routine floor waxing session. Ice had never spoken to janitors before. Hell, most officers treated maintenance staff like ghosts. But something about the way Ice studied Marisol's movements, the calculated precision with which she navigated around sensitive equipment, suggested a recognition that ran deeper than janitorial competence. "You move like someone who understands the value of silence," Ice had said, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken questions. Marisol had continued waxing, but her shoulders tensed imperceptibly. In the special operations community, silence wasn't just golden, it was survival. And Commander Kellerman had just identified something in Marisol that 3 years of deliberate invisibility was meant to conceal. The briefcase contained extraction codes for a deep-cover operative whose identity had been compromised in Eastern Europe. Standard protocol demanded a secure courier, someone above suspicion, someone the enemy would never think to watch, someone invisible. The irony wasn't lost on Marisol. Once again, her greatest asset was being underestimated. The same characteristic that had ended her flying career was now the key to saving lives. As she approached the final corridor, Admiral Harrison's voice echoed from around the corner, discussing tomorrow's joint operations with what sounded like half the Pentagon's leadership. Marisol adjusted her grip on the cart handle, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders like an old flight suit. Some missions, she'd learned, began not with rotors spinning up, but with wheels squeaking down an empty hallway. The hallway ahead stretched like a runway, fluorescent lights marking her path toward an uncertain extraction point. Just like old times, except this time, her aircraft was a janitor's cart, and her wingman was the darkness that had learned to trust her completely. Admiral Harrison's laughter grew louder, unaware that the success of tomorrow's operation rolled quietly toward him, disguised as Thursday night's trash collection. 3 floors above, in a secure communications room, intercepted enemy chatter crackled through encrypted speakers. The words were in Russian, but the intent was clear. They were hunting for their target, systematically eliminating anyone connected to the compromised operative. They had profiles on every military courier, every diplomatic attaché, every person with authorized access to classified material. They had everything except a file on the night shift janitor, who'd been invisible for so long that she'd become the perfect ghost. Marisol's breathing remained steady as she navigated the final turn. The briefcase's weight had become familiar, like the collective lives it represented pressing against her sternum. She'd carried heavier loads in Kandahar province, flying wounded Rangers out of hot landing zones while taking small arms fire from 3 directions. But those missions had been straightforward, point A to point B, with rotors and altitude as allies. This required something more subtle, more dangerous. This required her to remain exactly what everyone believed her to be, nothing worth noticing. The Admiral's voice grew distinct now, discussing operational timelines with the casual authority of someone who'd never had to trust his life to the competence of invisible people. Marisol had learned to read voices like instrument panels, detecting stress patterns and confidence levels in vocal inflections. Harrison sounded tired, pressured, but unaware of how close salvation rolled on squeaking wheels through his headquarters' sterile corridors. Her cart's left wheel had developed a rhythmic wobble sometime during the second year of this assignment. Initially frustrating, she'd learned to use it as a natural timer, counting rotations to measure distances and calculate arrival times. Tonight, that wobble sounded like approaching helicopter rotors, a phantom rhythm from a life she'd been forced to abandon. Marisol pushed the memory aside, focusing instead on the present mission's parameters. Deliver the briefcase, maintain operational security, remain invisible. Simple objectives that would determine whether Agent Blackbird lived to see another sunrise in Prague. The corridor ahead was longer than a carrier deck, its polished surface reflecting overhead lighting like runway markers in the pre-dawn darkness. Every step carried weight beyond the physical, the weight of trust, of professional resurrection, of proving that competence didn't require visibility. Commander Kellerman had seen something in her movements, recognized the ghost of training that 3 years of mopping floors couldn't erase. Some instincts, once honed to combat sharpness, never truly dulled. They just learned patience. Admiral Harrison's conversation continued, his words mixing classified operational details with mundane administrative concerns. Coffee procurement, personnel rotations, budget allocations, the unglamorous machinery that kept special operations running. Marisol absorbed it all, filing information with the automatic precision of someone trained to extract intelligence from casual observation. Even invisible people could gather valuable data, especially when their invisibility made them the perfect observers. The briefcase shifted slightly as she adjusted her grip, its titanium surface catching fluorescent light like morning sun on aircraft skin. Inside, extraction codes waited with patient urgency, numbers and letters that would transform into transportation, safe houses, new identities. The mathematics of survival, calculated by analysts who'd never felt enemy fire searching for their heat signatures. But numbers alone couldn't guarantee success. That required human judgment, timing, and the kind of situational awareness that came from years of making life-or-death decisions in environments where mistakes meant body bags. Marisol's reflection walked alongside her in the polished floor, a distorted mirror image that wavered with each step like heat shimmer rising from sun-baked tarmac. She recognized the woman in that reflection, not the janitor in coveralls, but the pilot who'd earned her call sign by jury-rigging a damaged tail rotor with nothing but mechanical intuition and battlefield improvisation. Wrench had been both compliment and prophecy, acknowledging someone who could fix anything that flew, including, apparently, covert operations that had gone sideways in Eastern European capitals. The Admiral's laughter echoed again, closer now, mixing with voices she recognized from classified briefings attended in her previous life. Colonel Matthews from Delta Force, whose team she'd inserted into more hot zones than either wanted to remember. Captain Rodriguez from SEAL Team 6, who still owed her $50 from a poker game interrupted by emergency scramble alerts. They'd worked together, bled together, trusted each other with their lives. Now they walked past her like she was furniture, unaware that their former wingman pushed trash through their hallways every night, invisible but eternally watchful. The fluorescent lights above hummed their mechanical mantra, the sound mixing with her cart's rhythmic squeaking to create an industrial symphony of forward motion. Each light fixture passed overhead like mile markers on a highway that stretched between her past and an uncertain future. The briefcase's weight pressed against her consciousness, reminding her that some roads led backward as much as forward, that redemption sometimes came disguised as simple service. Her fingers tightened on the cart handle, feeling the familiar calluses that had once gripped collective controls, now adapted to more mundane but equally important tasks. Commander Kellerman had chosen well, selecting someone whose operational invisibility was matched by unquestioned competence. 3 years of janitorial duty had been penance, punishment, and preparation. Penance for the mission that went wrong, punishment for the decisions that cost lives, and preparation for moments like this when invisible people became the most valuable assets in the entire operation. The irony tasted bitter and sweet simultaneously, like coffee brewed too strong but consumed anyway because caffeine meant staying alert, and staying alert meant staying alive. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, each step echoing with the weight of unfinished business and unexpected second chances. Marisol had learned that military service rarely ended cleanly, that competence found ways to resurface even when careers had been officially terminated. Tonight, her competence wore coveralls and pushed a squeaking cart toward a rendezvous that could save lives or end them, depending on variables she couldn't control but had learned to navigate with practiced precision. Admiral Harrison's voice carried new urgency now, discussing timeline accelerations and resource reallocations with the clipped efficiency of senior leadership adapting to changing circumstances. Marisol recognized the vocal patterns. She'd heard similar conversations before missions that didn't go according to plan, when improvisation became more valuable than preparation. The briefcase's contents would either solve problems or create new ones, but either way, Agent Blackbird's survival depended on variables beyond encrypted communications and secure transport protocols. It depended on a janitor's ability to remain invisible while carrying the weight of lives in a titanium case, hidden beneath industrial-grade garbage bags. The lights hummed overhead like distant helicopters, their frequency matching the rhythm of memories that refused to stay buried beneath 3 years of deliberate obscurity. Some sounds, once internalized, became permanent fixtures of consciousness. The whine of turbine engines spooling up, the rhythmic chop of rotors slicing through thin mountain air, the crackling static of radio communications coordinating extractions under fire. Those sounds lived in her muscle memory, activated by stress and responsibility, reminding her that some skills transferred between aircraft and janitor carts, between combat zones and sterile corridors, between visible and invisible service to country and mission success. The weight of the briefcase had become familiar, like carrying wounded personnel to safety or transporting critical supplies to forward operating bases. Different cargo, same responsibility. Different aircraft, same pilot. The woman who'd earned the call sign, Wrench, by keeping helicopters flying under impossible conditions, had simply adapted to a new kind of impossible, remaining competent while appearing completely unremarkable, valuable while seeming worthless, essential while maintaining absolute invisibility. It was, she realized, the most challenging flying she'd ever done, requiring navigation skills that no manual had ever taught. Admiral Harrison's conversation grew clearer as she approached the intersection where 3 corridors met like tributaries feeding a river. His words carried the authority of someone accustomed to having orders followed without question, but also the subtle tension of someone dealing with variables beyond direct control. Intelligence operations required trust in people you'd never met, faith in systems you couldn't verify, and acceptance that success often depended on factors invisible to command structure awareness. Tonight, that invisible factor was a woman whose competence had been hidden so thoroughly that it had become her most valuable characteristic. The briefcase pressed against her hip through the canvas bag that concealed it, its presence as constant as heartbeat, as urgent as conscience. Inside, extraction codes weighted with patient precision, digital keys that would unlock transportation networks and safe house protocols across 3 continents, numbers and letters that would transform into freedom for someone whose cover had been blown by circumstances beyond their control. The mathematics of salvation, calculated by analysts who understood probability, but had never felt the weight of lives balanced on split-second decisions made in environments where hesitation meant death. Marisol's coveralls bore the stains and wear patterns of genuine janitorial work, coffee spills from hurried senior officers, scuff marks from navigating around sensitive equipment, chemical bleaching from industrial-strength cleaning supplies. Every mark told a story of deliberate invisibility, of competence hidden beneath layers of assumed incompetence. The uniform was camouflage as effective as any ghillie suit, hiding someone whose skills had once been considered invaluable but were now apparently worthless. Except tonight, when worthless became priceless and invisible became indispensable. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows that moved with mechanical precision as she passed beneath them, each fixture illuminating and concealing in equal measure. The corridor ahead stretched like a runway cleared for emergency landing, its polished surface reflecting overhead illumination like approach lights guiding aircraft toward uncertain ground. Her cart's wheels maintained their rhythmic squeaking, a mechanical heartbeat that had become the soundtrack to 3 years of deliberate obscurity and patient preparation for moments that might never come. But they had come. Commander Kellerman's recognition, the briefcase's weight, Admiral Harrison's unwitting proximity to salvation disguised as trash collection, variables aligning like navigation stars, creating opportunities for those invisible enough to exploit them. Marisol had learned that military service continued long after official service ended, that competence found expression through whatever channels remained available, that duty didn't require visibility to remain meaningful. The intersection approached like a decision point, 3 corridors branching toward different destinations, different possibilities, different outcomes. Admiral Harrison's voice echoed from the left passage, discussing operational parameters with the casual confidence of senior leadership. The briefcase's weight pulled her forward, its contents demanding delivery with silent urgency. Agent Blackbird's survival waited somewhere beyond immediate visibility, dependent on factors that included but transcended her ability to remain unnoticed while carrying critical intelligence through hostile territory disguised as routine maintenance activities. Her reflection wavered in the polished floor like heat distortion rising from overheated engines, the woman in coveralls superimposed over memories of the pilot she'd once been. Different uniforms, same missions. Different aircraft, same responsibility. The transition had been more difficult than enemy fire or mechanical failure, requiring adaptation to invisibility after years of highly visible competence. But adaptation was survival, and survival was mission success. And mission success was all that mattered when lives hung in balance determined by variables beyond individual control or recognition. The cart's squeaking grew louder as they approached the intersection, its mechanical rhythm mixing with Admiral Harrison's voice, and the fluorescent light's electrical hum to create an industrial symphony of convergence. Multiple streams of purpose flowing toward a single point where invisible competence would either succeed or fail based on factors that included timing, luck, and the ability to remain exactly what everyone expected. Nothing worth remembering, someone completely forgettable, a janitor whose presence generated no curiosity or concern. The briefcase's titanium surface caught ambient light like morning sun, reflecting off aircraft skin, a brief gleam of metallic precision hidden beneath layers of deliberate concealment. Its contents weighted with digital patience, extraction codes that would either save or condemn Agent Blackbird depending on variables that extended far beyond Marisol's control, but remained within her influence. The weight of responsibility pressed against her consciousness like altitude pressure, familiar and unwelcome, but accepted as necessary cost of competence applied to missions that mattered. Admiral Harrison's laughter echoed through the intersection, mixing professional authority with genuine amusement at some unheard comment. The sound carried undertones of stress and fatigue, vocal signatures that Marisol recognized from previous interactions when he'd been just another superior officer dealing with operational complexities. Now he was unwitting proximity to success, his presence marking the convergence point where invisible service would either achieve mission objectives or fail spectacularly while maintaining absolute anonymity. The corridor stretched ahead like final approach, its polished surface reflecting overhead lighting with runway precision. Each step carried cumulative weight, the briefcase's physical mass, the responsibility for Agent Blackbird's survival, the possibility of professional redemption disguised as janitorial duty. Variables beyond calculation or control, but within the influence of someone trained to make critical decisions under impossible conditions, someone whose competence had been hidden so thoroughly that it had become tactically advantageous. Marisol adjusted her grip on the cart handle, feeling familiar calluses that had adapted from flight controls to cleaning equipment without losing the muscle memory of precision operation under pressure. The transition had been necessity, not choice, but necessity often revealed capabilities that choice never discovered. Tonight, her capabilities included remaining invisible while carrying salvation, appearing incompetent while demonstrating ultimate competence, being worthless while proving indispensable. The lights hummed overhead like distant aircraft engines, their electrical frequency matching rhythms embedded in her consciousness by years of aviation service. Some sounds became permanent fixtures of awareness, activated by stress and responsibility, reminding those who'd once flown that ground-based missions required similar skills applied to different environments. Navigation remained navigation, whether through airspace or hallways, whether avoiding enemy fire or unwanted attention, whether delivering supplies to forward operating bases or extraction codes to compromised operatives. Admiral Harrison's voice grew distinct as she approached the intersection's center point, his words carrying classified details mixed with administrative mundanities. Coffee procurement, personnel rotations, operational timelines, the unglamorous machinery that enabled spectacular missions. Marisol absorbed information with automatic precision, filing intelligence gathered through invisible observation. Even janitors could collect valuable data, especially when their invisibility made them perfect surveillance platforms. The briefcase shifted slightly as she navigated around a strategically placed trash receptacle, its weight redistributing like cargo adjusting during flight maneuvers. Inside, digital salvation waited with electronic patience, codes that would transform into transportation, safe houses, new identities. The mathematics of survival calculated by people who understood probability, but had never personally experienced variables that included incoming fire, mechanical failure, and split-second decisions, made under conditions where mistakes meant death. Her cart's rhythmic squeaking announced her approach with mechanical honesty, the sound as familiar as heartbeat, as constant as breathing. 3 years of deliberate invisibility had transformed that squeak into camouflage, the acoustic signature of someone so unremarkable that she'd achieved tactical transparency. Tonight, that transparency would either enable success or ensure failure, but either way, her invisibility would remain intact, protecting both mission security and personal anonymity. The intersection opened before her like airspace cleared for priority traffic, 3 corridors converging toward a single decision point, where multiple variables would align or scatter depending on factors beyond individual control. Admiral Harrison's presence indicated proximity to success, but proximity didn't guarantee achievement. That required navigation skills adapted to ground-based operations, competence hidden beneath layers of assumed incompetence, and the ability to remain exactly what everyone expected while being precisely what the mission required. Admiral Harrison rounded the corner at exactly 3:51 hours. His conversation with Colonel Matthews interrupted mid-sentence as he processed the unprecedented sight before him. The janitor, whose name he'd never bothered to learn despite 3 years of nodding acknowledgement, stood motionless beside her industrial cart, but something had fundamentally changed. Her posture carried military precision that coveralls couldn't conceal. Her eyes held situational awareness that no amount of floor waxing could teach. And most remarkably, she was looking directly at him with the confident expectation of someone who belonged in classified conversations. "Admiral Harrison," Marisol said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to radio communications under fire. "Commander Kellerman requests your immediate attention regarding the Prague situation. Agent Blackbird's extraction window closes in 14 hours, and standard courier protocols have been compromised." She reached into her cart, her movements precise and deliberate, retrieving the titanium briefcase with the practiced efficiency of someone handling critical cargo under combat conditions. Harrison's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to absolute astonishment in the space of 3 heartbeats. Colonel Matthews stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm before recognition stopped him cold. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his voice carrying the weight of someone who just encountered a ghost. "Wrench, Petty Officer Vasquez." The briefcase gleamed between them like a bridge spanning the gap between her invisible present and highly visible past. 3 years of deliberate anonymity dissolved in an instant, replaced by the kind of professional recognition that transcended rank, service branch, and official status. Admiral Harrison straightened unconsciously, his body language shifting from casual authority to the heightened attention reserved for briefings that could determine mission success or failure. "The extraction codes are current as of 2300 hours, Marisol continued, extending the briefcase toward Harrison with both hands in the formal presentation style, reserved for classified material transfer. "Commander Kellerman's intelligence indicates enemy forces have identified and eliminated 3 potential couriers in the last 48 hours. They're systematically targeting anyone with official access to Agent Blackbird's operational parameters." Harrison accepted the briefcase with the reverence appropriate to its contents, his fingers registering the weight of lives balanced on titanium hinges and digital encryption. "How long have you been carrying this?" he asked, his voice mixing professional curiosity with personal recognition of operational risk. 73 minutes, she replied without hesitation. Standard protocol would have assigned a diplomatic courier, but enemy intelligence has profiles on every authorized personnel. They don't, however, have files on night shift maintenance staff who have been invisible for 36 months. The ghost of a smile flickered across her features, acknowledging the irony of competence hidden so thoroughly that it became tactically advantageous. Colonel Matthews moved closer, his expression carrying the complex mixture of respect and regret, reserved for recognizing exceptional personnel in unexpected circumstances. "Wrench, what the hell are you doing pushing a mop when you should be flying missions?" His question carried undertones of anger directed not at her, but at whatever administrative decision had relegated someone of her caliber to janitorial duty. "Flying missions, Colonel," she replied simply. "Just different aircraft, different objectives, different visibility parameters." Her hand gestured toward the cart, its contents suddenly transformed from mundane cleaning supplies to sophisticated camouflage for covert operations. "Some situations require pilots who can't be seen, can't be tracked, can't be identified by enemy intelligence networks." Admiral Harrison's fingers traced the briefcase's titanium surface, feeling the weight of responsibility that extended far beyond Agent Blackbird's immediate survival. "Commander Kellerman's request specifically mentioned your operational assessment. She wants your recommendation on extraction methodology." His words carried the weight of someone who just realized that critical decisions might depend on insights from the most unlikely source. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like distant helicopter rotors, their electrical frequency matching rhythms embedded in Marisol's consciousness by years of aviation service and 3 years of deliberate invisibility. Agent Blackbird's cover was blown by digital compromise, not human error, she said, her analysis delivered with the professional precision of someone who'd learned to extract intelligence from limited information. Enemy forces are monitoring standard diplomatic and military channels, but they're not watching service corridors, maintenance schedules, or waste disposal protocols. "You're recommending unconventional extraction?" Harrison asked, his question carrying implications that extended far beyond immediate operational parameters. "I'm recommending invisible extraction," Marisol replied. "Agent Blackbird needs to disappear completely, transition from visible asset to untrackable ghost, the same methodology that's kept me operational while officially non-existent." Her words carried the weight of someone who'd mastered the art of functional invisibility under conditions where visibility meant death. Colonel Matthew studied her with renewed attention, his expression mixing professional admiration with personal curiosity. "The Kandahar extraction, that was you, wasn't it? The Night Stalker pilot who flew wounded Rangers out of that hot zone while taking fire from 3 directions." His voice carried the reverence reserved for legendary missions that had achieved mythical status among special operations personnel. "Different mission, same principles," she acknowledged. "Extract personnel under impossible conditions, adapt to changing circumstances, succeed despite overwhelming opposition. The only difference is operational visibility." Her cart's squeaking wheel provided punctuation to her words, the mechanical rhythm that had become the soundtrack to 3 years of invisible competence. Admiral Harrison's expression shifted again, this time toward something resembling tactical revelation. "Commander Kellerman didn't just choose you as a courier," he said slowly. "She's recommending you for the extraction operation itself." The weight of implications settled between them like classified intelligence too sensitive for casual discussion. The briefcase gleamed under fluorescent lighting, its titanium surface reflecting 3 faces gathered around an intersection that had become an impromptu operational planning session. Marisol recognized the moment's significance, not just the delivery of extraction codes, but the recognition that some missions required personnel who could operate beyond standard protocols, beyond official channels, beyond the visibility that made conventional assets vulnerable to enemy intelligence networks. "Agent Blackbird's extraction window closes at 1400 hours Prague time," she said, consulting an internal clock calibrated by years of precision timing under combat conditions. "Conventional extraction protocols have been compromised. Unconventional protocols require personnel who can't be identified, tracked, or eliminated by enemy forces. Personnel who have mastered operational invisibility." The corridor stretched in both directions like runway approaches, each path leading toward different possibilities, different outcomes, different levels of risk and opportunity. Admiral Harrison held the briefcase with both hands, its weight representing more than Agent Blackbird's survival. It represented the recognition that exceptional competence sometimes required exceptional concealment, that the most valuable assets were often the most invisible ones. "Petty Officer Vasquez," Admiral Harrison said formally, using her rank and name for the first time in 3 years. "Consider yourself reactivated for special assignment. Commander Kellerman's operation requires someone with your particular expertise in invisible aircraft operation." His words carried the weight of professional resurrection, recognition that competence didn't require visibility to remain valuable. The fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical approval overhead, electrical frequencies that had witnessed the transformation of invisible janitor back into indispensable pilot. Marisol's reflection wavered in the polished floor, no longer showing coveralls and cleaning supplies, but the ghost of flight suits and rotor wings. the outline of someone who'd learned that service to country transcended official recognition or formal status. Her cart stood beside them like decommissioned aircraft, its industrial contents suddenly transformed from camouflage to symbol of the transition between visible and invisible service. The squeaking wheel that had marked 3 years of deliberate anonymity now sounded like approaching rotors, the mechanical heartbeat of missions that mattered regardless of who received credit for their success. 2 hours later, Marisol stood in Commander Kellerman's private office, the familiar weight of flight suit replacing coveralls, the comfortable pressure of combat boots instead of industrial work shoes. The titanium briefcase sat open on the desk between them, its contents now expanded to include extraction protocols that would require piloting skills adapted to unconventional aircraft and impossible conditions. Agent Blackbird's survival depended on someone who could fly under enemy radar, while remaining completely invisible to intelligence networks that had systematically eliminated every conventional option. "The aircraft is designated Phoenix 7, Commander Kellerman explained, her briefing delivered with the crisp efficiency of someone who'd learned to communicate critical information without wasting time on unnecessary details. Modified Bell 407, civilian registration, maintained by a private contractor who specializes in keeping aircraft invisible to official documentation. No military markings, no traceable communication equipment, no connection to any government entity." The flight plan stretched across European airspace like a navigation puzzle, designed by someone who understood that successful extraction required more than reaching the target. It required reaching the target without being detected, identified, or tracked by enemy forces that had proven capable of anticipating and neutralizing conventional approaches. Marisol studied the route with professional attention, her mind automatically calculating fuel consumption, weather variables, and the kind of low-level navigation that would keep them below radar coverage while maintaining operational effectiveness. Agent Blackbird's last confirmed position was a safe house in Prague's Vinohrady district, Kellerman continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd personally invested in keeping valuable assets alive despite impossible odds. "Enemy forces have established surveillance protocols on all major transportation hubs, diplomatic facilities, and locations with historical significance to intelligence operations. They're essentially watching everywhere someone would expect to find extraction support. Except places where no one would think to look," Marisol observed, her response carrying the professional insight of someone who'd learned that survival often required thinking beyond conventional parameters. "Industrial areas, service corridors, locations that appear completely unrelated to intelligence operations." Her fingers traced the flight plan's route, nodding approach vectors that would utilize terrain masking and urban concealment to remain invisible to both radar systems and human observation. The modified Bell 407 specifications read like a masterpiece of functional anonymity, enough performance capability to handle extraction operations, enough conventional appearance to blend seamlessly with civilian helicopter traffic, enough electronic countermeasures to remain invisible to standard detection systems. It was, Marisol realized, the airborne equivalent of her janitorial cart, hiding exceptional capability beneath layers of assumed ordinariness. "Phoenix 7's pilot will be you," Kellerman stated simply. "Agent Blackbird's survival depends on someone who can navigate European airspace without triggering any official attention, someone who can land in impossible locations, someone who can adapt to changing circumstances without depending on support that might be compromised." Her words carried the weight of recognition that some missions required personnel whose competence was matched by their invisibility. The briefing materials included photographs of Agent Blackbird, a woman whose appearance suggested administrative rather than operational duties, whose background indicated language skills rather than combat training, whose survival would depend entirely on extraction personnel capable of operating beyond enemy intelligence expectations. She looked, Marisol thought, like someone who'd been chosen for invisibility rather than visibility, competence concealed beneath layers of assumed incompetence. Timeline is non-negotiable, Kellerman emphasized. Phoenix 7 departs at 600 hours, arrives Prague airspace at 11:30 local time, establishes contact with Agent Blackbird at predetermined coordinates, completes extraction, and returns to base before enemy forces realize their target has vanished. The operational window was tight enough to require perfect execution, loose enough to allow for the kind of improvisation that distinguished exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. Marisol absorbed the briefing with the focused attention of someone who'd learned that mission success depended on understanding not just official parameters, but underlying variables that could determine life or death outcomes. Weather patterns across Central Europe, civilian air traffic density during morning hours, enemy force deployment patterns, alternative landing sites if primary extraction points became compromised, the invisible architecture that supported visible operations. Questions? Kellerman asked, her voice carrying the professional courtesy of someone who recognized that exceptional personnel deserved more than orders delivered without opportunity for clarification or input. Just one, Marisol replied. After Agent Blackbird's extraction, do I disappear back into janitorial duty, or does Phoenix 7 become permanent assignment? Her question carried implications beyond immediate mission parameters, touching on professional recognition versus operational security, visibility versus continuing effectiveness as an invisible asset. Commander Kellerman's expression shifted toward something resembling tactical satisfaction. Petty Officer Vasquez, some pilots are too valuable to waste on conventional assignments. Phoenix 7 is the first aircraft in what will become an entire squadron of invisible operations, missions that require personnel who have mastered the art of exceptional competence combined with complete anonymity. Her words carried the weight of professional resurrection, recognition that the most challenging flying required pilots who could succeed without taking credit. The office's fluorescent lighting seemed less harsh now, transformed from institutional sterility into something approaching operational warmth. Marisol recognized the sensation, the familiar comfort of belonging to missions that mattered, contributing skills that were valued, serving purposes that extended beyond individual recognition. It was, she realized, what she'd been missing during 3 years of deliberate invisibility. Agent Blackbird doesn't know about Phoenix 7, Kellerman added. Operational security requires that she believe extraction will arrive through conventional channels. Her survival depends on enemy forces making the same assumption. The layers of deception within deception, invisible operations protected by multiple levels of misdirection and concealment. Outside the office windows, dawn approached with the gradual illumination that marked transition from night missions to day operations. Somewhere in Prague, Agent Blackbird waited for salvation that would arrive disguised as civilian helicopter traffic, piloted by someone whose competence had been hidden so thoroughly that enemy intelligence networks had no awareness of her existence or capabilities. Marisol stood, her movement carrying the fluid precision of someone returning to natural element after prolonged absence. The flight suit felt familiar, comfortable, like rediscovering clothing that had been stored rather than discarded. Phoenix 7 will be ready for departure at 600 hours, she said simply. Agent Blackbird will be extracted according to mission parameters. The titanium briefcase closed with the definitive click of classified materials secured according to protocol. Its weight had transferred from physical object to operational responsibility, from carrying extraction codes to executing extraction operations. The transition felt natural, inevitable, like recognizing that some missions began with pushing carts through dark corridors, but concluded with flying aircraft through enemy airspace. Commander Kellerman extended her hand with the formal gesture reserved for recognizing exceptional personnel assigned to exceptional missions. "Welcome back to flight status, Wrench," she said, using the call sign that had marked recognition of someone who could fix anything that flew, including extraction operations that had gone beyond standard repair protocols. The handshake carried weight beyond professional courtesy, recognition of competence that transcended official rank or status, acknowledgement that some skills were too valuable to waste on conventional assignments, appreciation for personnel willing to serve invisibly until visibility became necessary for mission success. It was, Marisol realized, what she'd been working toward during 3 years of deliberate anonymity. Dawn light filtered through office windows as she walked toward the door, each step carrying her closer to the flight line, where Phoenix 7 waited for its first operational mission. The corridor ahead stretched like final approach, polished floors reflecting overhead lighting with runway precision. Behind her, the weight of janitorial service dissolved into memory. Ahead, the familiar weight of flight operations beckoned with the promise of missions that mattered, flying that challenged, and the kind of invisible competence that saved lives without requiring recognition. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like distant helicopter rotors, their electrical frequency matching rhythms embedded in her consciousness by years of aviation service. Some sounds, once internalized, became permanent fixtures of awareness. Tonight, those sounds would mix with actual rotor noise as Phoenix 7 lifted off into European airspace, carrying invisible salvation towards someone whose survival depended on the competence of pilots who'd learned to fly beyond enemy observation. At 5:47 hours, Marisol completed her pre-flight inspection of Phoenix 7 with the methodical precision of someone who'd learned that attention to detail determined mission success or catastrophic failure. The modified Bell 407 sat in a civilian hangar 30 kilometers from Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters, its appearance so unremarkable that even aviation enthusiasts would have dismissed it as routine corporate transportation. But beneath conventional camouflage lay sophisticated modifications that transformed civilian aircraft into military capability, without triggering recognition from enemy intelligence networks. The rotor blades showed no signs of fatigue or stress, their composite construction designed for operations that pushed performance parameters without sacrificing reliability. Marisol ran her fingers along the leading edges, feeling for imperfections that could become catastrophic failures during low-level flight through European terrain. The engine compartment revealed meticulously maintained power plants that would provide sufficient thrust for extraction operations, while remaining quiet enough to avoid acoustic detection by ground-based listening posts. Phoenix 7's interior had been stripped of corporate luxury, replaced with mission-essential equipment that included secure communications gear, medical supplies, and defensive countermeasures that could defeat standard surface-to-air missile systems.